All right, this is my potion acid flask. Throw in Falconer, and this is probably the most damaging and like just pure speed that I've ever gone through the campaign. I just started this game like 4 to 5 days in, like around 100 hours. So I'm not that like into the game yet, but this was just a quick build. I'm like, oh, what can Acid Flask do? Because I saw a lot of throwing. You can get flat throwing on most of your gear, and I kind of wanted to see what it did. And I've been playing a lot of the Rogue. I did the other two um, variations of the Rogue, but I never did the Bird, the Falconer. And then I noticed that there was a lot of potion stuff. I wanted to do potion and this class, so it worked out that they're both in the same. Anyways, so during the leveling, I had some leveling gear in my stash. It'd be way easier to do campaign without these boots, but these boots are pretty crazy for this build since we're turning our flask into cold with this offhand catalyst, and it gives us 45% more AoE and changes everything to cold, the base, the poison chance, and this actually still works with this node where your flask is supposed to be converted into fire, and then you get 100% more hit chance, but you don't get any poison. And the cold conversion still works, so we can still scale everything off of colds and also get the 100% damage boost. And I was doing some respecking, so I would I went into the throw and fire damage. This is just flat, like a huge amount of flat damage, and then a huge amount of crit and multiplier. So yeah, these three are like the main damage of the entire Flask build is just these three nodes. But I did some respecing and testing, so I didn't have a chance to level this back up. I'd probably fill this to 5 with mana efficiency if I have enough points. But then other than that, triple throw in, you throw 3 instead of 1, and then barrage because of the projectile speed, and it's just a lot easier to kill things when you're fanning it out than in a line. And then armor shred, I didn't have this before, but I would definitely put more into this because armor shred is pretty insane in this game. It just makes you do more damage and from all hits, so it's like a global damage boost. Area effect is always nice. Slow is you have to get it to go to here, but there is some scaling off of that from this tree, the falconer tree, down here, where you do more damage against slowed per stack. So I'll probably eventually go into this if I decide to take this any further. And for here, I win with this is just an extra point, just flat fizz. And then attack speed for this build isn't really that great because the flask, eh, the whole like premise I was going for this build is just you throw it on flask and you just dash and one shot everything as you go. And that's pretty much how the most of the campaign went. So attack speed didn't really matter too much. Plus energy is sort of a problem with this build, so more attack speed, just be more energy drain. And then just straight deaths, because that's a big way of how we're scaling this. So dexterity's giving us a huge percentage boost to damage, and then we have flat throw-in damage on all of our gear. And you can get throw-in damage on like pretty much everything from what I've seen. And if you can't get this throw-in damage, you just put dexterity, and some you can get dexterity and throw-in damage, which is perfect. So yeah, throwing damage on like everything. I didn't have these gloves during the campaign, and I found these like just yesterday, but those would have been crazy to have because yeah, just a ton more damage. You get a proc on throwing axe and more dodge rate. This helmet I've pretty much used on like every build besides the minion one I just did recently. Having almost 300% crit strike chance is really nice, and you have +4 to all attributes. So this helmet is amazing for leveling new characters. The flask is, I don't think converting to ice is really matters, but I think it looks cool. And it's a flask you can wear at level 0, so I just put that on. It's kind of the main reason I actually decided to go this build, was that I saw you could wear it at level 1 and I wanted to use that through the whole campaign. Uh, this chest piece is insane. It gives, I have it, mine gives 20 dexterity. I think it's really hard to get it with 20 dexterity, but besides that, it's still a good chest piece to have. You get +1 to dexterity skills, which is Acid Flask is a dexterity skill. So you basically just get an extra skill point for it. And this is just another skill point for Acid Flask, get more area. Poison damage doesn't convert, and then you just get more attributes. So this is just kind of like I had nothing else to put, so I just put that. And then just throwing damage and dexterity on all the gear, everywhere it could be. These boots, this turns your build into a total glass cannon, and it's really amazing until you get to the giant octopus boss. Then these are pretty they make the fight interesting. I died like about 8 times just, but I was one shot in like the different phases of the boss. And since he does pure lightning and colds, and these boots take away, you get minus resist on fizz and cold. So any enemy you run into that does cold damage, and there's a big part of the campaign that is like cold enemies for a long time. So that whole area sucked. The octopus boss sucked. Yeah, I didn't have too much problem with fizz enemies, and during the campaign I was running like the same amount, 80 dexterity. This is like the build I was using during the campaign. I was running like 80 dexterity, so I was getting minus 80 on colds. I don't have any idols in because I haven't played this character in a bit. But yeah, so keep in mind if you want to run these, you are going to be very, very squishy. There's not much you can do about it besides maybe going a ton of dodge. And the way that I've kind of worked around those boots is using shift, and you can get invulnerability after shifting. And this skill is amazing for just like blasting through the campaign. You get a lot of cooldown, mana efficiency, and the main thing is momentum. You get 50% increased movement speed for 1.5 seconds, which doesn't seem like much, but this thing has a low cooldown, 3 seconds. So every 3 seconds, we're getting 50% move speed. And that works really well with this passive, where your movement speed is being scaled with your damage too. So every percent of movement speed, we're getting 1% damage. So with everything going at the same time, so we dash, roll. Oops. I can get about 128% move speed, and that's getting me 128% damage. So while we're running pack to pack and rolling, basically dash, roll, and throw, or just roll and throw, it keep you around the same. Yeah, and you'll pretty much one shot every pack, or even the rare monsters, bosses. It's pretty much it just tears them apart. And then we have dexterity on these. This is more movement speed to scale the damage. It's 8% damage, and you get a bunch of throw and attack. And then just more dexterity, because dexterity is scaling everything with these boots. I dropped these later and just went for something with resist and dexterity, because I kind of got tired of like fearing for my life of every single hit. And towards the end of the campaign, enemies do scale pretty crazy with their damage. So I would recommend running these for like the first half up right before maybe even the cold region, I think I'd drop these. And you should have enough damage on your flask if you've been putting flat everywhere to just still be one-shotting, so it doesn't matter. I was like overkilling enemies by far. At one point, I had the like damage per second, which isn't very accurate because it takes in attack speed, and we're not throwing more than one flask at an enemy at a time. But anyway, so it was like up to like 30k, 30,000 damage per second on the calculation tooltip. Yeah, so that's crazy. And that was just if I added these nodes back in, it would have been like 30,000. And then smoke we have with shadows. Shadows also throw your things. And so we have shadows, just more duration so we can get more shadows going. And they do disappear after they throw. So after they throw, they disappear. So duration just gives us more. And we also get more throw and damage, flat damage while we're standing in it. It slows, which would be nice for the more damage against slowed per stack. And then armor shred. This is probably not that great, actually, but it's just something extra. I think I was running out of points. You can go more area, but the thing that's kind of cool about the shadows is so if I pop smoke, go over here, your shadows actually have like unlimited range, it seems like. So you can just the range of the smoke doesn't matter unless you want like the armor shred. I was using net for the mana gain because I was having mana issues. And that's basically it. And then you also get this buff over here that gives you more damage against slowed enemies and 20% more attack speed and throw and attack speed too. So I just went that. And oh, and then no longer flips back so you don't do some awkward movement every time you throw the net. And then the Falcon, this is a big part of the damage. Like he's probably more than half of your damage is the Falcon. He's a little hard to get to actually attack things though, so that sucks, but you can convert with these three nodes, convert a lot of your damage into his damage, which is pretty sure just adding on even more because he's how he works is he can throw your flasks or your what are these called? Yeah, your flasks. He can throw your flasks and he can have multiple charges and you can grant him charges when you're throwing flasks. So he sort of doesn't even run out. Yeah, so he sort of doesn't even run out. And I have the prioritize enemies close to you. I feel like this didn't really make much of a difference. I'm kind of wondering if just dropping these two would maybe be better and then go something else. But there's not much else you can really grab because this requires you using his skill, and I didn't want to use his skill because if he's using his skill, he can't throw the flash. So yeah, that kind of sucks. Maybe it's good if you wanted to like one-shot bosses. You could get this to 150% and then use his skill and then use your flash after, but it's only one hit, so I don't know. And then yeah, we already talked about that. Yeah, so he's throwing your flasks. Shadows are throwing your flag. You're getting damage from your movement speed. So if I got to a boss, the combo would basically be drop your smoke, dash, throw, and then roll, and then just keep doing this until the boss is dead. And your bird will keep chucking flash as you're going. And on the tree, we're just looking for throw and damage and its dexterity everywhere we can. Haste is nice for the movement speed, as movement speed scales our damage. And that's about it. I'd probably get this node eventually to scale off of slows. And I still haven't found a good way for defense. I would need to find a lot of more dodge on gear, which I didn't really find through the campaign. But yeah, I'd definitely go dodge for this character since you are a rogue. And yeah, so I think that's about it for this character. Some gear you could use if you don't have these, or wanted if you didn't have that, you probably aren't gonna have dexterity on this. The haste is nice, and you do get +1 to dexterity, but you could go something like elemental damage. This is really nice because you get less elemental damage taken. So if your resists aren't that great, this is a really good chess piece. And you have a lot of options. You could go something like fire damage because if you don't want to use the cold conversion from this offhand catalyst, you could go this node, which you would probably take anyways if you go in Flask, and it turns everything into your physical to fire. So then you could scale full fire, something like Calamity. I was using this during the campaign because I didn't have these gloves, and this just gives 30% cold. You get some resist. These are just resist items I used during the campaign. This belt's pretty good. You get throw in speed. You can poison, which isn't. We're not really doing a damage over time build, just a burst, so it doesn't matter. This would be. I'd probably use these just for the crit strike multiplier on throwing. I think that would be pretty worth it, especially if you have this helmet. And then these are just some leveling pieces that I had. And while you're leveling, you just want to craft anything that has throw-in damage and dexterity. So you could take any piece you find on the ground, just slap on throw-in dexterity. If you don't have these, just use the shatter rune. Throw something in that has them, and then you get the thing to keep and put on other gear. So yeah, so many pieces of gear can just get flat thrown. So yeah, I think that's about it. It's very fast, and it one shots like most packs. Yeah, so this build is basically just designed to get through the campaign. Could probably swap to something else, and whatever you want to do. And then once I got to maps, I had to swap these boots off and go something with more resist to get these the cold and fizz back to something that doesn't one shot me. So yeah, that's it for the flask throwing Falconer cold build.